Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I've been at this a long time. This is my 30th year in Baltimore radio, and I've thought back about the bad beats and the hard times we've had here. Nothing quite like the 1979 World Series and losing to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I've had the pleasure of knowing Grant Jackson, who we lost recently. I've had Kent DeColvey on my program over the years. Bert Blyleven many, many times on my program. It is a pleasure and honor, and I would not have said this in 1979, to welcome Dave Parker onto the program to promote his new book, The Cobra. And, I don't even know where to begin with you, Dave, because, man, I grew up with you, man. It's great to have you on the program. How you feeling? How's your health?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I have good days and bad days, but mostly good.
Well, when I see Parkinson's, I know what that struggle is. I've had family members, so I know where you are. You're trying to make that happen. But you got a book, and you're telling stories. I've been seeing it out on Twitter because you've done a lot of my friends' shows and stories. But I started to think back about the '70s and being involved with the Pirates. The first thing I would ask you if I sat next to you in a plane would have been like, you played with Clemente. Wow. That was, something that at the beginning of your career, that's what a way to start a book, huh?
Yeah, and what a player to start it with. Clemente was a great player, and I enjoyed my time with him. And it was a thrill to know him.
Back in Pittsburgh in the '70s, I think of your baseball team and what you guys accomplished in '79 and beating us here, fair and square, 7 games as I remember it. But what the Steelers were there, right? And and the Pirates and the Steelers, sort of like the Orioles and the Colts were here. There was some sports harmony about what was going on, I would think, in both of the seasons, and I would think that fed into being happy to be there in Pittsburgh in the '70s.
Yeah, it was a great place to be. We were called the City of Champions, and we won it. They won the Super Bowl, and we won the World Series in the same year, and that just made Pittsburgh an ideal place for sports.
What do you remember about '79 in the World Series? It wasn't played at Camden Yards behind me, but over Memorial Stadium. I've watched that film so many times. I was at Game 2. My dad was lucky enough. I was 10 years old. I was about to turn 11 years old, and I remember the snow pushing one of the games off. But when you think of '79 and you think of that week and a half period of time, it was a great World Series. But what do you remember about winning here?
Well, I recall me slipping on a fly ball line drive hit by Eddie Murray to right field, and I broke back on it and slipped and put my hand down to maintain my balance, and I ended up getting my balance back and catching the ball. And I recall running in the dugout, and Matlock said, "You're lucky you caught that ball, because if you wouldn't, you would have had to keep running through the right field fence because you couldn't have came back here." So that was a play that could have changed the whole series.
I went to look you up for the interview, and they gave me a PDF of the book. And I'm going to promote the book, and we'll talk more about why you wrote the book. But the first thing I think of when I think of you were two things I think of. I mean, and all the baseball cards and, the World Series and all of that. But, I remember being in Cleveland Stadium at the end of your career, and you're with the Angels right at the very end. And it was the smallest crowd I've ever been in at a stadium. And here you were sort of playing out the string at the end. And a couple weeks later, you were like in the playoffs with the Blue Jays. So you went from like playing not in this situation to at the end of your career. You were a guy at the end of your career that every team sort of wanted to rent at the end to have you around to try to win. That was an interesting place for, I think, baseball, because when you began, there was no free agency.
Well, I was a hired gun. I went to places to be that missing link, that one piece that they needed to be a playoff or a World Series team. So I was a hired gun, and I went to Pittsburgh. Well, Pittsburgh was my main spot, but I went to Oakland A's as a hired gun and got them in the World Series 2 years in a row. I went to Milwaukee Had a very productive year for them, but I was one of those guys that they looked at as being a missing piece.
Did you ever get used to that? I mean, I was a reporter in the 90s, you know, and I always found it strange to be going in the locker room and a guy said he got traded. I had Ken Singleton on a couple weeks ago talking about the day that, you know, that Don Baylor got traded out of Baltimore. And man, when you leave your first team, especially with the brotherhood you had in Pittsburgh, right? You get tapped on the shoulder the first time, it's probably very emotional. Even if you sign a big $1 million deal, it's emotional. But then at the end, you spend all summer like being in trade rumors, and you might go to Cleveland and you might go to LA or you might be here. I always found that to be sort of weird for the players to not just perform, but just know what to do with their wife and kids. Because as a kid, I never thought about that.
Well, that's why you tip your hat to the wives, because they take on a heavy work detail, you know, because they got to get the kids into school. They got to transfer from one city to another. And you got to tip your hat to them.
Well, I was going to tell you when I looked you up, I thought the first thing I'll see on you will be the All-Star Game throw, because that's really what I think of when I think of your career, and maybe it's a This Week in Baseball thing or Mel Allen or the fact that I was watching it from the Kingdom that night with my pop, and you know that 79, 80, 81 period. I mean, I was 10, 11, 12, 13. Baseball was my whole life, Dave, right? You know, trying to find you to get an autograph or something, you know, when you come to town. But I think about that throw. And I went back and I watched it again. It's been a long time since I watched it, but it's up on YouTube and you can watch it. I didn't realize you threw out Brian Downing. Let's start with that, right? You know, I had to go back and say, but when you think of a play or a moment in your career, and I know you just wrote a book, so you've been asked to do a lot of this. When you think of one thing, what do you think about when you say Dave Parker, baseball player?
A complete player. I think I was the most complete player in baseball. I could throw, I could run. I was a 5'2" player. I had 26 assists, which was unheard of. So I just think of myself as a complete player, and I just had a platform to display it on.
Writing a book. I've written a couple of them. I know you had a writer with you on this. Why here? Why now? And quite a book. I mean, you're getting a lot of accolades on it. More than anything, it's thick and it's literally you're 69 years old now. Like apparently you didn't hold anything back when you wanted to tell these stories.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to write the book. I wanted people to hear from Dave Parker for the first time, because there's been a lot of speculation on what type of guy I was, you know, the things that I did. And I wanted to straighten all that out and let it come from my mouth. And that's why the book was put together.
Well, certainly easy to hate anybody from Pittsburgh when you're from Baltimore and you come in here and beat us. But, you know, but from the drug trials to the end of your career and the kind of ball player you were, I literally thought you might have been in the Hall of Fame and slipped in. You know, my last name's Aparicio. I mean, I come here honest. Louis came here in the 60s. I'm the last remaining family member, Aparicio family member. And I had to think, did they put Dave in or did they not? And then I went back and I saw the voting and whatnot. And, you know, I've seen what's going on with Kurt Schilling and obviously Roger Clemens and Pete Rose. And you're from Cincinnati. I don't need to tell you. Was there ever a point you thought you were going to get in?
I thought I should have got in 5 years, and it never happened, because I dominated baseball from 75 to 80. And I thought that was enough to get me in, but evidently it's something else that they're dealing with, because I did everything you could possibly do to be a Hall of Famer.
Well, you were a hell of a ball player, man. I always wanted your baseball card. Then you beat us. I've forgiven you. I had to forgive Bert Blyleven one night. We took a walk, and he took the ring off, and he's like, just wear the ring. You'll feel better for a little while. So I wore Bert's ring for a couple of blocks. He was doing the Twins, Circle Me Bert, and all that stuff. But you know, that team, quite a legacy for Pittsburgh, you know, all these years later, right?
Right. That team was a unique team. I mean, we really loved and cared about each other. And that's one of the teams that I hold closest to my heart, is the Pittsburgh Power team, because we we were a family, and we displayed that on the field and off the field. So Pittsburgh is the team that I identify to.
Man, you broke my heart. We are family. Omar Moreno, his wife, with that whistle and the song and the Village People. When a song comes on, do you dance, Dave, when you hear the Village People? I mean, not Village People, We Are Family, Sister Sledge. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, the first thing I think about is that series. So I think about Baltimore every time I hear the song.
You want crab cakes, huh? Hey, I want to ask you before, because I wrote down a whole bunch of notes. I'm crazy. Ask anybody. I did 30 ballparks in 30 days back in 2015. My wife's a two-time leukemia survivor, and a bunch of the teams were very kind. They let us swab for the bone marrow registry to sign people up to save more lives. And when I was in Cincinnati, when I did the ballpark that day, and I go to Cincinnati a lot, Marvin Lewis and I are close, and all the years of the Ravens and the Bengals, I've been at all those games. So I'm there. I've had a lot of, chili and I've probably been to a couple of your Popeyes locations, had the new sandwich, I would say that the thing about Cincinnati, I went looking for Crossley Field, and I literally went during the day looking for it. It's like a warehouse area. And I thought about Frank Robinson, playing there, and Klaczewski and like all of that from back in the 50s and 60s. And I've seen like the Ken Burns colorized version of what the stadium looked like. Give me a Crossley Field. Like, you grew up in that neighborhood, right?
Right. I was a block away. I used to hang at the ballpark during the season, hustle balls that was hit out of the park. And Crossley Field was a part of my life.
Memories of it. I mean, where it was and why there's no demarcation. Like, I went to look for it. I couldn't figure out. There's not even like a home plate, Dave. There's nothing.
Well, they got second base.
I couldn't find it.
You couldn't find second base?
I was looking. It's like on this. It's in like a transportation delivery. It's a bunch of trucks and warehouses. I literally spent 2 hours walking around with Google Maps trying to figure out where it was, just to get some perspective on it. And it's gone, man. It's gone, right?
Of a building. Second base is inside a city gospel.
All right, I'm going to have to go back. That's it. Maybe I'll go back with somebody like you. Dave, really a pleasure to have you on, man. I loved watching you play. It's always a thrill to have my childhood heroes and villains. You were a villain a little bit, but I did root for you. I always punched your name for AllStar, just so you know. When the little ballots came out, I did that for you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Take care of yourself. Good luck with the book. The book is The Cobra. You can buy it. You can find it anywhere. All of Dave's tales and stories. Good health to you. Stay strong, all right?
All right, I will. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Dave Parker joining us from outside of Cincinnati, even though we think of him as a Pittsburgh guy for sure, with the new book, Cobra, A Life of Baseball and Brotherhood, along with Dave Jordan. You can go find that anywhere books are sold. You can find me anywhere Baltimore Positive is. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking great baseball stories in Baltimore Positive.